All right, this video is about 9/11/2001. Where was you at during 9/11/2001 during the World Trade Center incident? Where was you at during 9/11/2001 during the World Trade Center event? I'm going to tell you where I was at. I was in Lompoc, California, doing what I got to do. Gunshots, 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 gunshots. Let's get this thing started, man. All right? Let's go. Tune in. Let's get it going. Let's get it popping. All right, you know what it is. Come on, let's go. All right, this unique Mecca audio, man. I'm hyped today. All right, today is the anniversary for 9/11. All right, now I'm gonna tell you where I was at during that time period so you understand. All right, it was September 11th on a Tuesday, and the day before. Well, the night before, we was all watching Monday Night Football. You know what I mean? Monday Night Football. So it was popping. Beginning of the season, and, we smoked our little, trees and had the white lightning popping, and, everybody just had a good time. We got our zooms and whams. That's what we call, our snacks. Snacks in prison is called zooms and whams, all right? So now, so you fully understand where we at. It was September 11th. I was in Lompoc, California, right? 6 a.m. I'm drunk, you know what I mean? I ain't even wake up yet, so I'm hungover, One of the homies came to my cell early in the morning because they know that I like to smoke my trees early in the morning when I wake up to get my day started, right? So I'm sitting there, laying back in the bed, got the lights covered, and you see what you see behind me? This is exactly the way Lompoc, California looked in the unit on the day room. You see how you got the second tier right there? It had 4 of these tiers. I seen a man get thrown off the 4th floor tier over the rail because they had no barbed wires or nothing there. So you understand. Now, all the way in the back where you see the yellow all the way back there behind me, you had a TV back there that was the white TV. About 10 feet up, you had another TV that was, the Hispanic TV. That was the what they call that? That was the Sereno TV. A little bit in front of that, then you had the Python TV. So you understand. So now we got the Python TV, second, and then we got the black TV. We normally put it on BT, things like that, and do what we had to do. So we got all these things lined up. So while we got them lined up, that's the way the tier looked. And everybody got their chairs around the TV. But end of the night, this the way it looked, but they got the TVs that's mounted out there. So I'm laid back in my cell. While I'm laid back in my cell, my man come knock on the door because the way this type of prison worked, this is one of the older prisons from the early 1900s. So everything worked from a center control and they locked the doors. But the doors in Lompoc is solid, and then it has a little square window on the top. And, we get like a piece of plexiglass, and we get that siliconed on it, and you can slide it over like little Venetian blinds, like you in a weed spot or something. So my man come to the door, and he said, yo, you, what's up? A plane just ran into the World Trade Center. I said, nah, get out of here. I said, man, get the F away from my cell. So he's like, nah, I'm telling you. But I figured that he just trying to get high. So he come at me with this old bull crap, So I said, tell him to open my door. So the police open the door. I get up. I don't even put on my flip-flops. Don't put on my boots. I go barefooted, stand at the door because my cell is right in front of the black TV, right? So I'm standing there barefooted because I would never violate and have flip-flops on outside of my cell with the doors open. If the doors is closed, you could wear your flip-flops, barefoot, whatever. But when that door's open, you got to be suited and booted. That's how vicious the penitentiary was. So I'm in the killing field, and my man come tell me that a plane, a 747, just ran into the World Trade Center. It's my homie from New York. So while I'm looking, I said, oh, crap. And I ain't even going to front. I almost violated and ran out there, but I ran back in the cell, threw my boots on, my steel toes, and I ran out there. I had to grab my knife. I grabbed my knife and I ran out there to the TV. And I'm looking, and while I'm looking, and he's telling me, I'm still not believing him. But as I'm watching, I hear the newscaster say, another plane is going towards the second tower. Another plane is going towards the second tower. I said, whoa. And then I seen the plane hit the tower. I'm like, oh my God, my sister worked down there. Because my sister's an attorney and she worked down there in that World Trade Center area. So I ran to the phone and called, and my sister didn't answer, and I panicked. I ran back to the TV and I'm watching, and I said a prayer. And I think it's time that we say a prayer now for the, victims of 9/11, the first responders from 9/11, and the people that got affected from the aftermath of 9/11. Lord, please take care of these people. Please cleanse our hearts so that we don't have any ill feelings or any vindictive feelings towards the people responsible for this. Please take care of our people and myself and my family, our loved ones, and my sister. Amen. That's where we was at, right? So now, while I'm sitting there, dude woke me up. I'm thinking he just trying to get high. That's why he woke me up. So like I said, I jumped up, ran out, you know what I mean? I didn't even put on my flip-flops, All the New Yorkers, ran to the phone to call their family members to see where they was at, being that it happened in New York, right? Now, my sister didn't go to work that day, thank God, because she was up the night before working on my case, trying to get me off of this life plus 20 years sentence that I was serving. So I was blessed for that. You know what I mean? Now, George W. Bush was in Sarasota, Florida, and he was reading to children, and they flashed over to that, and you saw where they whispered in his ear, and George Bush is a straight gangster. Round of applause to George Bush. All right, calm down. George Bush is a gangster. I'm going to tell you how much of a gangster George Bush is, because a lot of my younger people don't even know this, because a lot of y'all was born during this time, and in the 90s when you was babies and didn't know what was going on. At that time, they had the first election, I'm going to call it complications during our time, where George Bush roughed off the election from Al Gore, and they took it to the Supreme Court, and they ruled in George Bush's favor and gave it to him. George Bush now is the president, and a lot of people is saying the same thing they saying now about Donald Trump and Joe Biden when they couldn't decide who really won the election. So there was a lot of talk about that on the news. But when 9/11 happened, I'm not even going to front. America came together. Washington came together. And they forgot about who was president. But at that time, because everybody wanted, majority of the people that I knew, they wanted, Al Gore to be the president, and they felt that he won and that George Bush roughed it off. So at that time when this happened, and they felt like, George Bush roughed it off, when the 9/11 happened, all of that went out the window, and everybody was happy that a straight line gangster like George Bush was in office and not Al Gore, because Al Gore, was more of a lip professor, and, the type of person to try and, talk his way out of a situation when George Bush, was like a little Donald Trump. You know what I mean? He was like a baby Donald Trump, where he was gangster. But he was the first gangster president that I seen during my time. When that happened, George Bush went and held a news conference. And when he held the news conference, it was a bunch of children behind him from the school that he was speaking at in Sarasota, Florida. And that man was so gangster, you know what I mean? And this when I knew that Washington was gangsters. You know how you see a motorcade with people riding on a highway and, like the police, escorting a car. Like when I went to trial, I had a motorcade when I was going to court, right? Every time I went to court, they had helicopters flying overhead. They had motorcycle police in the front. Then they had police cars, state troopers in the front. And then they had, me in the middle with a van. Behind that, they had more, what they call it, police in the cars. And then they had motorcycle behind them. And this is how they taking me to court. Like if I was some major terrorist figure or something. So could you imagine what I felt like going to trial and going to the courthouse with this big entourage of my enemies? Could they consider me as an enemy of the state? But that was a motorcade. I actually saw for the first time, right? That's when I knew America was gangster and I had to give them their props and George W. Bush's props. When that went down, George W. Bush had an air brigade, where he's in the middle and he got all these F-1 fighters around him and they leading him to where he's going. I said, that's gangster. Gunshots, gunshots, gunshots. This man is in the air in a plane. They shut down all air transit. When George W. Bush got in the air, was going where he was going. They was told, and they said this on national TV that everyone heard on all the news stations, that if you see any plane in the air, you got permission to shoot it down, including commercial civilian airplanes. Could you imagine America shooting down a Delta airline plane because it's still in the air? They ordered all planes grounded, man. And I'm watching this and I'm stuck in a prison. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? But that's how gangster George Bush is. And America. Now, so after that happened, like I said, they all forgot about it. They was in Sarasota, you know what I mean? So the prison didn't even know what to do at the time, So we all sat there watching on the news. The police is watching it with us. America didn't know what to do. They didn't even call a lockdown because they never anticipated anyone coming and touching anything on American soil. At that time, when that was going on, I remember it distinctly because I'm an old historian when it comes to my generational time. When that went down, George Bush was beefing with Saddam Hussein, looking for weapons of mass destruction, where he said that he wanted to go and check his mosques, his personal houses, and anywhere to look for weapons of mass destruction, because they was trying to say that they was, enriching uranium and building weapons of mass destructions in the synagogues and this and that. And Saddam Hussein told America, you could come in and look for what you would like to look, but you're not allowed to go in our religious houses or my private house, And America said, George Bush told Saddam, I'm going where I want to go. Saddam said, nah, you're not going in my personal palaces. George Bush said, well, you got about approximately 10 personal palaces. And you telling us we can't go in them. So Saddam Hussein said, would you allow anyone to come and inspect or search the White House? So how would you expect to come to my land and search my White House? And it was a big standoff. So George Bush was dropping bombs on him. I'm giving you all some good history right here. You know what I mean? Make sure you follow me on Instagram. You know what I mean? It's on the screen. Now, and my Cash App is up there. I don't care if it's $1, $5, whatever, because I'm giving you a real life history what it was like in the prison. So that's what was going on at the time. So Saddam said, nah, y'all ain't coming in my joint. So they dropping bombs on him. But they put on the news that it was Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. So George Bush sent some planes over there to go drop some bombs on him. So while they was dropping the bombs on him, this the gangster joint that, right? I mean, I fell in love with it. I got to give him a gunshot. Man. George Bush, right? So you understand, George Bush was sitting there, and the fighter planes called back to George Bush, said we dropped all the bombs and hit all the targets, and we still have approximately, let's say, 5 bombs left. What should we do? We're heading back to the base. George Bush said, nah, drop those 5 on Saddam so he know that we didn't forget about him. You know what I mean? Now, the beef at this time is with Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden. But George Bush said, those last 5 that you got that you didn't need because you took care of all the targets, drop those on Saddam so he know we didn't forget about him. You know what I mean? I said, oh, man, he got to be the most gangsterest president in the world. At that time, he was the most gangster that I've seen, And then came Donald Trump. We'll speak on that later. So now they go back to the joint, you know what I mean? So the prison went to breakfast like normal because they didn't even call it a lockdown because it was all the way on the other coast in New York. So the prison went to breakfast. The BOP didn't even know what to do, Then Washington called a nationwide lockdown where they locked down all the prisons similar to the way they did it back when they had the crack law riot. That's where they held me down, flexi-cuffed and shackled. My feet was tied together. My arms was tied behind my back. I'm laying on my back, and I'm looking up at these Europeans, and they standing over me with this big riot gear on. And they took their big boots and put them on the side of my head because I kept wiggling, trying not to let them hit me. So they trying to bang me in the face with axe handles and batons. So while they was trying to bang me in the head with the axe handles and batons, I'm wiggling my head. And they took their boots and they clamped it on the side of my head, and they took the axe handle and banged me in the front of my mouth and knocked out all 4 of these front teeth. That was Lewisburg. If you youngins want to go through this, continue to do what you're doing. I'm telling you, don't do it. I'm sitting here recanting American history that I was in a federal prison and couldn't get past these bars if they decided to drop something on us. So if that's how you want to live your life, youngins, continue doing what you're doing. But I'm telling you, it's not worth it. But I'm also telling you, if you choose to do that, don't let this YouTube propaganda about telling, is acceptable get you killed when you go into prison. Because if you tell on the street and wind up in prison, you are susceptible to be murdered. And that's the last thing I want for you. So let me get back to the story. Let's ride, man. Let's ride. So we riding. You know what I mean? So Bush held a news conference in Sarasota, Florida, with the children that he was getting ready to read, a children's book to around them. Historical moment. That's how gangster he was. He didn't wait till he get back to Washington because he was scared to death to go back to Washington because they were scared to death that they was going to drop a bomb on the White House. So the safest place for him was the air because he shut down all air transportation. Anything in the air, the F-1 fighters was instructed to shoot down. Could you imagine this? That's what was happening. You know what I mean? Then next thing you know, about 9, that was about 9 o'clock. You know what I mean? Because I got up at 9. I got up at 6 in the morning in California when my man woke me up. I'm high, like I said, a hangover from the white lightning in the football game the night before. And that was about 9 o'clock New York time, 6 o'clock LA time, And 9:30, about 9:17, that's when the other plane hit the other building. You know what I mean? And 9:30, it hit the Pentagon. You understand? And they took over these planes with box cutters and knives. Could you imagine that? A dude with a box cutter and a knife took over a whole plane and ran it into these buildings at approximately 500 miles an hour. That's how crazy this was. Because America was so lax, they didn't think anything could happen. How, right now, if somebody tried to take over a plane with a box cutter and a knife, you know what I mean? The Americans will maul them on that plane. You know what I mean? But they don't went and hit up the pilot, threw their own pilot in there, threw him to the side, hit up the, you know what I mean, his little co-pilot and all that, threw him to the side and took this plane. And they even rerouted a plane. By like 10:17, they rerouted a plane and that one didn't get to hit a target because they fought back like they would today. And that one crashed in Pennsylvania. And that was, like 15 miles away, people were saying that 15 miles away, they felt the vibration. That's how powerful it was when this plane hit the ground. This is what we went through in America. So you youngins understand, and the ones that don't pay attention to it, So now, when Bush held that news conference with the kids, that was a powerful moment, That was, like I said, right after the Bush versus Gore, when they was trying to say that the election was close, and Bush said, man, I won, get out of here. You know what I mean? And pushed Gore to the side. And of course, the Democrats tried to do it the democratic and diplomatic way. And, Bush said, man, I won. Took it right to the Supreme Court where he know his daddy and Reagan and them put those, last presidents in. So he knew they was going to, vote in his favor. So, of course, they voted in his favor, gave it to him, and everybody was on the news talking about how he roughed it off. But once that happened, they knew that Al Gore wasn't aggressive enough to handle a situation like that. So that's what kind of eased George Bush in for them to give him a smooth way that he was in charge, of the country, and he won the election. But y'all don't even talk about that no more, about how Bush roughed off Gore, so you fully understand. Now, the hijackers took over the plane and redirected it, you understand what I'm saying, to New York. Could you imagine that? And crashed into a building at 500 miles an hour into the World Trade Center in Midtown. They hit it like in the middle of the building. You know what I mean? They hit it in the middle of the building, and when the plane hit, it was like the 75th to the 85th floor. And I think it's 110 floors in the building, if I'm not mistaken. So you rat bastards, you know what I mean? And trolls and police calling, want to talk about you gangster, you on the street. Cowards. Correct me in the comments. You know what I mean? So now, when this happened, can you imagine what those passengers felt like at this time? Being on a plane and seeing the captain getting thrown out the cabin, and you know what I mean? I'm just making it. I don't know if they really threw him out the cabin or they left his dead body in the cabin. You know what I mean? No disrespect to him. You know what I mean? May he rest in peace. But could you imagine what that felt like for the people on the plane? Imagine what we felt like locked in a prison, knowing that our family members is in New York City and not knowing what's happening and trying to call the family members and can't reach them. It was madness. It was complete madness. Now, the World Trade Center went up in 1973, and that was, at that time, the tallest building in the world, and America was so proud of this building. So they chose, the terrorists chose to take down that building to show them that you're not in charge of nothing over here in the Middle East. And we could touch you all the way over there on the West. This is where the war first began. So you understand, You had people jumping out the buildings from 60, 70, you know what I mean, floors up. They jumped out. Could you imagine what they felt like being in those buildings, hearing the plane hit and it explode? And those buildings, being it was built in 1973 and America was on nobody would ever touch this time, so they didn't create any means, of an evacuation route in that building, in those buildings, for how to get out of those buildings. So people panicked. They ran to the windows and jumped from 50 stories high. What would you do? Put it in the comments if you were stuck in that building at that time when that went down. These people chose to jump from the building. I don't know if they thought they was going to survive or they was committing suicide. So they didn't want to burn up. So they'd rather hit the ground and die that way. But this is what went on. So y'all fully understand what we're saying and where we're going with this. You know, over 200 people, approximately 200 people jumped from the windows. Would you jump from the window? Or would you sit in there and burn to death? Or hope somebody came up and rescued you? And that's why we have to give the first responders the props and a round of applause. God, please protect our people. Can you imagine a plane running into a building halfway up, and then now, at the time, being hit in the middle, when it blew up and it burnt, that middle of the building is burnt. So the top half of the building, it collapsed down on the lower part and just poosh, and crushed these people. Could you imagine dying that way? That's why we have to, it don't matter what race, what color, what gang, what creed they're in, we have to say a prayer for them because we're all God's creation. But could you imagine the firefighters running in the building, going up these flights of stairs, when the people up the stairs that they're risking their lives for is jumping from the window? Jumping from a 50-story window, and these men is attempting to run up 50 flights through the smoke and debris, and they wind up getting, you know, all of those, you know, like the asbestos and all the chemicals and the steel and aluminum burning mixed with the flames and the fire and the gas tank and all that in their system. They're inhaling this even though they had on masks. And then when all of this is over, they go to Washington and said that we need funding. We need money, you know, for our medical bills. And they actually had to vote on it, and with the nine bills, until they finally gave a bill. I think it lasted up to 2020, if I'm not mistaken. Again, you rat bastards, flip-flop wearing in public, trolls. Correct me in the comments, because you love to look for fault, because you have no life. Now, imagine that these first responders ran in the building when people was jumping from 50 stories up. Now, is that a hero that's dedicated to our people or not? You tell me. What would you do if you was a firefighter and told to go in this building, approximately, I think it was 110 stories, like I said, but a 747 jet ran into the 71st to the 85th, the 77th to the 85th floor, and you running in knowing that that building is going to collapse, but you're still going in it? Is that a hero or not? They most definitely deserve our prayers and a round of applause. And I pray for those people's families right now because they lost so much by gambling. So just remember, like I said, so you understand, you know, September 11th, 2001 was the worst day in American history because another country declared war on American soil when Americans is used to going to their country doing this. And now they brought it to our country and did this. That's why I'm wearing red, white, and blue today. Today is my Patriot Day. And we must say a prayer for our people, and we must unite. And that's why I don't understand why, you know, our people of color, our urban people come on these YouTube channels and eat each other's backs out when we're supposed to be uniting together. And it's crazy because YouTube created financial means of, support for us to come on these channels and enlighten our people like I'm doing. But then so much of our people come up here and manipulate it to get views and eat each other's backs out and disrespect our own people. But they won't disrespect the other races, but they disrespect their own. It's the same as black on black crime, black on black YouTube crime. And I'm reaching out to the YouTubers to let them know, please stop this. You got people that make their living off of YouTube from eating each other's backs out and don't realize who the real enemy is. But instead they creating enemies amongst their people, amongst our people. So what do? You don't want to wind up in prison and having to witness this like I did. And that's why I'm doing this show, to let y'all know it's not worth it. Put your comments in it. Cash App is on the screen. Remember, my last name do not have a 1 in it. It's Unique Mecca Hall, Hall, not HA1L. And hit the logo in the Cash App, and it'll say that my account was created in 2020 to make sure that the funds go to where it needs to go. Because the game is to be sold, not told. And I asked for a Cash App so you understand, because I refuse to eat my brother's back out to get a YouTube check by disrespecting my brother. So instead, I reach out to my subscribers and my viewers that enjoy and get something from my content to give me those extra funds instead of me having to violate my people to get the YouTube funds like so many other platforms are doing. If y'all can't understand that, I don't know what to tell you. But I've been on here long enough, man. Say a prayer for the first responders and the families of the people from 9/11, because nobody should have to go through what this country went through in 2001, 9/11. All right, may God bless you.
Cheers, cheers, toast the crime, toast the crime, the crime, the crime, the crime.
Fresh out the can of 26, yeah. He back on the strip, getting back in the mix. Yeah. What he mentions a gift. You stand up 10 toes down, and I suggest you pay attention to this. Real. Take a little gully posse and put it in Harlem. He cut from the bottom, came up from the bottom. Drop the book, you should go and get it. The Instagram page and the YouTube, you could go and visit. Yeah. Then you could consider yourself LinkedIn. Real. Sit front row and get Jews from a kingpin. How he went through it, so you ain't gotta go do it. To not pay attention would be stupid. Talking about a man that probably put your grandfather on. Probably the reason that him and your grams got along. A man that generated millions on the block, did his time, never squilling to the cops, Mecca audio. get it live like 2 G's in the 90s. Drop top Beamer so shiny. I let shorty go, she was whining. Treat her like my past, she behind me. Spend a couple bands on the Dapper Dan. You be back again, getting green like a Packers fan. No cap, it's a roaring uptown. They be horn uptown, Dominican bust downs. Now we on the positive, we got a lot to give. Now he trying to stop the kids from being inoperative. So take heed, homie, lend an ear. He started in uptown, he gon' finish dead. But now it ain't about selling drugs, buying cars. It's about buying property to make the community ours. So we can give back to the youth them. Cause they the truth them. And bless up to all the road men.